Good evening and happy Thursday. I am Luke Dow. I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs here at Stewart County Community College, and it is my honor to welcome you here to a poetry reading for Janice Northerns. One of the things that we take pride in here at Stewart County Community College is the people. We are who we are because of the people that work here, the people that support us, and the people that worked here in the past, and our students that attend here. And so because of that, it's our honor and it's really exciting that we get this chance to celebrate with Janice and her book and her work that she's accomplished. And just one example of some of the awesome people that we have that are associated with Stewart County Community College. And I see a lot of them out here in the crowd today. So thank you for those that came out. Thank you for those who are watching on Facebook Live. And Janice, congratulations. This is a great honor, and we are so ecstatic to celebrate it with you.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Darren Workman. He is the Division Chair for Humanities and Social Sciences here at the college, and he will do an introduction.
All right, well, this has been a little strange for me because Janice is one of the people who usually made fun of me and my division and my program throughout the years, and now I have to say something nice about her. It's not that hard. She's very talented. In fact, it's because of her and her husband Bill that with the Poetry Coffee House that happened long time ago, we were discussing that, 2006?
12 years ago.
Yeah, 12 years ago, that I really hadn't been around poetry, but I've learned to appreciate it since our Poetry Coffee House. And I told Janice, this book was one of the first ones I actually finished from the first to the end, without pictures and, coloring in or anything like that. So it was a great book. But I'm going to go ahead and give you some background about Janice before we have the nice reading. I was supposed to present flowers, but Terry told me I was too old to hold them because they were too heavy. So the flowers are from the Humanities Division. And so you're in for a really special night tonight. Well, Janice Northerns grew up on a farm in rural West Texas and holds a bachelor's and master's degrees from Texas Tech University, where she studied with acclaimed poets Walt McDonald and William Winthy. While at Texas Tech, she received the Robert S. Newton Award for Creative Writing. Janice and her husband Bill McLothing moved to Liberal in 1998, where he took a job teaching English at SCCC, and she went to work for the Southwest Daily Times, first as a reporter, followed by a stint as managing editor. She taught at USD 480 for 6 years before coming to SCCC as an English instructor, a position she held for 11 years. Before retiring in 2019, the author's poetry has been widely published in literary journals and has won numerous awards. Some Electric Hum is her first full-length collection. Now I introduce Janice Northerns.
Thank you, Darren. Okay, this is the typical question, but this is on, right? Okay. The flowers are lovely. Thank you, guys. Okay, the first thing I'm going to have to do is take off this cute poetry mask because I can't read in it because it keeps getting stuck in my mouth. So that's sort of like you take off your high heels when you get ready to dance. I put on the work mask. I do want to thank everyone at the college that had a part in helping us put this together and make a safe in-person event during the pandemic. Lori Muntz, who is the English teacher that replaced me at Stewart County, spearheaded the effort and was my contact person. I want to thank Luke Dowell, our Vice President of Academic Affairs, And Darren Workman, the Humanities Division Chair. I don't think he's ever said so many nice things about you, so thank you, Darren. Terry Barnes, our Humanities Division Secretary, who does everything around here. She's just wonderful. I also want to thank Rachel Coleman and Phil Lee in the Publicity Department, the Public Relations Department, for helping to publicize the event, and Josh Reward in IT for helping us get the Facebook Live event. It means a lot to me to be giving my debut reading of Some Electric Hum in person here at Seward County Community College. This was my home for 11 years. Liberal has been our home for much longer than that. The college and the community has always been very supportive whenever we've had a poetry event. So it's really special to me to be here and see all of you. And with everybody spread out, it actually looks like there's a lot of people here. So I keep that in mind for future reference. I want to welcome everybody that's tuning in live on Facebook. I'm really glad that you could join us in that way also. I'm also really hoping that a fly doesn't land on my head and steal the show. I'm going to read for about 30 minutes, then we'll take some questions if anybody has any, and then Terry is going to draw for a couple of free books from the people that are here, and then we'll move out to the lobby where I'll be available to sign books if anybody would like me to. I'm going to start this evening with the title poem from the book, Some Electric Hum. I've had people ask me where the title came from, so I thought that would be a good one to start with. This poem is set in Liberal, and when we moved here in 1998, I looked around, and there are a lot of great things about Liberal, as those of you who live here know. But even if you like the town, I think most of us would agree, when you look at it, it's not really a place that you think of as inspiring poetry. So I was quite surprised when we moved here in 1998 to learn that two really prominent poets had spent part of their growing up years here, and that's William Stafford and B.H. Fairchild. It meant a great deal to me that B.H. Fairchild actually wrote one of the blurbs on the back of my book because we have this Liberal connection. So I got all excited to find out there were two pretty famous poets that had lived here, and it made me think maybe there is something poetic about this town. And I started thinking, is there actually something, maybe they left me some layers of poetry in the air or in the water, or maybe just the town itself has somehow collected these layers. That's what the Some Electric Hum is. It's the hum of poetry that runs through this town. There is a painting term in the first stanza, pintamento, which means layers of painting. This is a technique sometimes where an artist might have a painting and then paint over it with another painting, and so you had several layers of painting. In the context of the poem, I'm thinking of it as what I thought was kind of a boring or nothing town, actually having all of these layers of poetic inspiration. Also, my mask is probably going to keep falling down. Some Electric Hum, for William Stafford and B.H. Fairchild. In barren southwest Kansas, hard-baked edge of the great American desert, natives brag on empty air, a sky stretching out for miles. What a shock to find instead these heavy layers, a dense pentimento streaked on sky's canvas, waiting to be revised. Stafford sensed it too, wrote of touching rock where Coronado walked, and that clanging armor sways as Stafford's words hang on the breeze. Fairchild later felt the charge of weighted air as he roamed Liberal streets, counting all doors, poems to be opened. Shop laves sang to him and play for me still. Some electric hum lingers here, a multiplying pulse that sets us down on the corner of 2nd and Main, breathing in the same rearranged molecules, just in different years. The sky is so crowded with past vocabulary that storm clouds spill verbs in the dirt. Poetry pooling underground in a space carved out by a drained aquifer. Overhead, stanzas glide on thermals, kite tails of iambs and spondees shimmering in the heat. This space, masquerading as a mute Kansas stare, unfolds for me now an invitation to grab hold, grapple with words just west of the tongue. I catch the drift of remnants as they eddy and roll, at last coalescing into direction, a whisper on the wind, go. Oh, I meant to say before I started, whatever you want to do after each poem, if you want to clap, that's fine. You don't have to clap. If you want to boo, that's not really fine, but you can. Whatever reaction you have is fine with me. No booing, that's good. The second poem I'm going to share is also set in Liberal. This one is quite a bit darker, and it's based on an event that happened around 4 years ago. Those of you that have lived here a while will be familiar with it. It was quite shocking. In 2016, we had 3 men who lived in Liberal who were actually accused and then later convicted of domestic terrorism because they were plotting to blow up an apartment complex in Garden City, which is just down the road, primarily because Somali immigrants lived there. We have a pretty large immigrant population in Liberal and in Southwest Kansas, and this is actually one of the things I think that many of us like about our community. It's very diverse and a wonderful place to live. And so it was really upsetting to not just the immigrants, but to those of us who are not immigrants. I was really proud of our community because they came together and showed a lot of support for the Somali immigrants. I had a student who was a Somali immigrant in class at that time, and so it hit home especially hard for me and for others of us who had students who were Somalis. There are some phrases and lines in the poem that are direct quotes from the accused terrorists who were later found guilty. I think you will recognize these words when you hear them, so I'm not going to do the air quote thing. I got these quotes from the telephone transcripts, which were made public. The FBI tapped their phones, so that's where I got the information, and it's actually quite chilling. Wake up call. In the back room of Kansas, they plot holy war. Target apartments 1 town over, home to Somali cockroaches. A makeshift mosque, the final straw of insult. Conspiracy theories drill their rumpled brains like a right-wing lobotomy, ice pick behind the eye, chiseling rage. We need to wake people up. Use a bow on them cockroaches and dip it in pig's blood. Ain't gonna be nothing nice about it. At the community college across town, 2 sisters in hijab master English grammar and write of Somalia, milking goats after school, warm foam, swirling in cups of tea like clouds in a bright African sky. They don't write of famine or war or tell how one sister, child bride years ago, longs for the children she left behind. When news breaks of the foiled attack, the sisters remain unafraid. These girls have seen worse than middle-aged white guys playing out fumigation fantasies. But the terrorists have done a number on those of us with padlocked American lives. We are wide awake now. A leaky faucet we mistook for insomnia, their words drop down. Plop, plop, plop. Each ripple, an echoing shiver in the far-edged river of dark. Kick in the doors and kill them one by one, slowly with a silencer, even the 1-year-olds. And that last stanza was, again, a direct quote from the terrorist. The next poem is also, I guess you might say, politically topical, although it's based on a more personal event. A few years back, my husband's mother had 3 large silver spoons, serving spoons I guess they were, and she gave one to my husband Bill and each of his 2 sisters. This was not my family, so I thought it was really cool. The story behind the spoons, though, is they belonged to an ancestor, and they had been buried under a plantation in Mississippi during the Civil War. So I just thought it was cool that he had the silver spoons. Because it wasn't my family, I didn't really think about the weight of history maybe affecting Bill in terms of how people might react to having a Civil War artifact that came from a plantation. So I made a shadow box for him. I printed out a picture of the plantation and put some information and put the spoon on there. But it bothered Bill quite a bit because it was his family, and he worried that maybe we shouldn't even display this because it might be offensive because of the connection to slavery. So this is where that poem came from, and it's called Silver Spoon. Your mother, divesting herself of history, gave each of you a silver spoon with a story tied around its neck. Sterling heirlooms buried beneath ancestral plantation on the eve of Mississippi's Battle of Iuka. I frame yours atop a fading photo of the house, two-story columned cliché of antebellum South. But once it hangs, you worry that spoon into a Confederate flag, family relic now a beacon of shining blame. Shall we melt down silver and remake the past, mold it into a badge of whitewashed hearts? No, let's choose to keep it, if not on the wall, then at least in plain sight, a heaping spoon of gritted ash, reflecting tarnished light. When I was putting together the poems I was going to read, I realized many of them are not that cheerful. So I decided to lighten up the mood with this next poem, which some of you have heard before. This poem is about my son, and maybe about all the kids who a lot of times don't fit in at school or in trouble, not bad trouble, but just have a hard time getting along with the teacher. That was always me. So I have a lot of poems in the book that are about people who feel a little bit like they don't belong. The setting for this poem, we were at my in-laws at the lake, and everybody was out on the back porch, and they have a row of ceiling fans along the back porch. The grown-ups were all sitting there reading the paper. My son Jordan had gone down to the dock fishing. This is called Flying Fish for Jordan. Only this boy, just turned 10, can disrupt our Sunday paper squabbles as he rushes from lake to back door, showing off his catch. We look up, expecting a perch at line's end. Instead, a sudden rhythmic whoop, 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 and a catfish whirls around the ceiling fan. My son drops down on one knee, yelling, I'm sorry, as he ducks each spin of the fish, knowing he's done it again. Only this boy finds trouble so often. Just last week, the note sent home, failing 5th grade science. But he knows skies Orion and the depth of the Mariana Trench, knows mating habits of 10 kinds of fish, including this one, circling, amazed above us all. Only this boy, the teacher says, forgets answers straight from the book, is a failure to pay attention, follow directions. I look at this boy now, dodging a catch, he's somehow hooked to the sky. There are 5th grade teachers trolling obvious waters, and there is my son, casting his line into the clean unknown, never worrying the hook may fall back on him. Who will save the world from filled-in blanks? Only this boy. So I just mentioned that a theme that runs throughout the book is people that feel like they're outsiders or perhaps don't belong. This next poem is about a historical figure, and I've tried to look in the poem at the situation from her point of view. The poem is about Cynthia Ann Parker, who was kidnapped by Comanches when she was 9 years old and then rescued as an adult. She had a really hard time adapting to quote-unquote civilization, and people did not understand why she wasn't happy that she had been rescued. There's an epigraph from this poem, and the epigraph is from a wonderful book called Empire of the Summer Moon by S.C. Gwynne. It's a nonfiction book, but if you're not familiar with it, it's worth a read. Here's the epigraph. Texan Cynthia Ann Parker was kidnapped by Comanches at age 9 in 1836 and lived with them until 1860, when she was recaptured by Texas Rangers. During her 24 years with the Comanches, she married War Chief Pettinacona and bore him 3 children. Pettinacona gave her the Comanche name Nakda, which means someone found. Someone found. Rangers yanked her, so covered in buffalo blood and guts, only blue eyes gave her away. They brought her back to picket fences and hot water, a Bible and a corset to shore up her soul. Nakda wept for her boys, not yet warriors, lost in the raid. Were they wandering the vast grasslands alone, or like their father, gone for good, bones smoldering in ashes of rage? White words stuck in her throat. Starched calico weighed her down like a shroud. She fled, prairie flower on her hip, baby toes swaddled in mother-stitch moccasins, beads glinting by North Star's light. Caught, brought back, she ran again and again. Locked up each time by family astounded at a captive who did not want saving, Nakda whispered Comanche prayers into daughter's dark hair. She wept for wisdom, but did not wait for a sign, as her fleeing feet pounded this message into the ground. You cannot rescue someone already found. So the thing about preparing for a public event in a pandemic, the good thing about wearing a mask is you don't have to worry about makeup on the bottom half of your face. But again, I had a panic attack this morning trying to find a mask that would work, and this one works great, but it keeps falling down. So Someone Found, the one I just read, was based on a historical event, a very famous one. Often, poems are based on what you might think of as ordinary events, and that's what my next poem is about. We probably all had the experience of looking through somebody's yearbook, especially yearbooks from a long time ago. It's fun to find pictures of the person whose yearbook it is, see how many times they appeared, look at the inscriptions. Usually in high school yearbooks, the inscriptions are pretty predictable. Good luck in the future, you're a great friend, kind of blah, blah, blah. So the setting for this poem, I was looking through the yearbook of a friend who later turned into my husband, so another Bill poem. Anyway, we were looking through Bill's yearbook, and I was enjoying finding all the pictures of him, but I came to an inscription by one particular person that kind of stopped me in my tracks, and that's where this poem came from. Remembering his name. My friend and I paged through his high school yearbook, the 1968 Blue Devil, giggling over bell-bottoms and bangs. Mostly it's just what I expect. His picture on every other page, as cool quarterback, president of the senior class, salutatorian. Inscriptions are scribbled all over by fellow players and girls with prom queen good looks. Every message is high school trite, until I come to one from a boy named Gary, which starts out usual, but ends with this truth. You were lucky in high school because people will remember your name. I ask about this one. My friend says 10 years after graduation, Gary, doing 80, drove his car off a cliff. Something about that yearbook sentence makes me want to find this boy, whose picture appears only once, and tell him I understand his black hunger in driving over the edge, hoping that years later, and miles from shattered glass, someone would tell the story to a woman, and she would not forget his name. I really like poems that put together what may seem disparate elements, and I enjoy it when I can do that in my own work. This next poem mixes together two things. One of them was a piece of information I came across when I was reading years and years ago. I have no idea how long it was. But I was reading an article, and the article said that Polaris, which is our current North Star, would not remain the North Star forever. At some point in the future, because of something known as precession of the equinoxes, the stars slowly move, and we would have a different North Star. I found this actually quite startling, because my idea of the North Star is that it's constant, it's the one you navigate by. We even use that phrase as a metaphor a lot of times. He's my North Star, my guiding star. So it's kind of shocking to me to know that someday the North Star was going to go away. So I just held on to that piece of information, and then the larger part of this poem, which I put together with that, this is a poem about my father, and particularly about the exact moment when I realized that my father was not going to live very much longer. North Star. Evenings, we walked that path to barn and back, me lagging behind as I navigated over cow patties and grass burrs, Daddy never breaking his stride. As his warm, calloused hand swung by his side, I'd reach up, land my hand in his, feel its sure strength guide me back to the path. Skipping in from school on days too cold for plowing, I'd find his hands at work. Newspapers spread around him, he shelled pecans, and kitchen warmth cocooned us as I hummed to the steady crack, crack of the hulls. I watched his gloved hands shake those pecans from trees his father planted on the land, trees I once thought would stand forever, like the towering cliff behind our house. Oh, not really a cliff at all. Just sandstone outcropping, maybe 5 feet tall. To my 9-year-old eyes, that rock seemed high as the sky, solid as a father. But the fissure down its center foretold how rain and cleaving roots would do their work, and one day I found sandstone had let go, left a fractured scrabble at my feet. This morning, my father stumbles through the kitchen in this house he built 50 years ago, as though he's tightrope walking on a starless night. Trembling, he holds out his hand. I clasp it tight, steadying his legs for this journey across an unmapped stretch of sky. Me in this mask are having a war. I retired a year ago, just in time to miss all of the pandemic remote teaching fun. So I have to say I haven't really envied my former colleagues, and we have a lot of teachers in the audience tonight, and I know some out there listening on Facebook. You've had a big task to figure out how to do things remotely, teach on Zoom. It's also been hard on the students. Especially last semester when the stay-at-home order went into effect, I watched my 2 adult children and their spouses struggle with working from home, trying to supervise their children's education. And I know that many people are still dealing with those things, and you feel like that you are pulled in a million different directions. So this next poem was about a time in my life when I felt a similar way. I was a divorced mother raising 2 kids, and I was driving back and forth from the town we lived in Texas to Texas Tech, which was about 90 miles away, and never really felt like I had time to do any of the things right, either being a parent or being a student. During this time, I started having a recurring dream about falling off of the bridge. There was a bridge in a town halfway between my town and Lubbock, where Texas Tech was located. And so this is called Flying Off the Overpass. Dreaming the incline too steep, I slam down hard on gas, but the car lets go, and I fall back through black air forever before waking. In daylight, that bridge sets just outside Post, Texas, along a 90-mile stretch of Highway 84, halfway between a place where I am scholar, writer, called by name, and home, hearing, "Mom," always once too often. I yell at the kids to shut up, go to sleep, please, so I can study, then miss them in a quiet house. And sitting in class, I worry the oldest forgot lunch money, or that my blue-eyed boy won't forget I missed his school play. Years from now, when knife-bladed dark dreams slide under their skulls, will my children only know I was always driving away? And what if one night my wheels touch the bridge at the exact moment the moon becomes full and ripe enough to burst, and I spin out to meet dark with one gleaming fang and patches of fur blossoming down my back, neither half of me knowing on which side of the bridge to fall. I think I'm going to share one more poem with you, and then, as I said, after that, if anyone has questions, we'll do that for a few minutes. I'm going to close with a poem that is about relationships, and especially learning how to value the other person's way of doing things. When you're in a long-term relationship, you have to sooner or later figure out that just because your partner does things differently doesn't make them wrong. Sometimes they're wrong, but sometimes maybe their way of doing things is better. And so I think, especially when you're new to the relationship, it can take a while to get all of that ironed out. So this was early in the relationship with Bill, who I later married, and kind of the realization that even though we had different ways of doing things, there was something I could learn from his way. Coming out of Rough Creek Canyon, I dream of Mexico beaches or nights along the Riverwalk, a destination. As usual, you won't commit to anything until it happens. There's no talk of tomorrow or where we'll be a year from now. I press for a plan. You say you'll surprise me. But last summer, camping on the Llano, you brought no food. Not even a pan for the fish we caught. I fumed. But if we had stopped to cook, we'd have missed that armadillo just off the path. Moonlight glinting on tarnished armor, a found coin in the dark. So this time, I wait and see. Sunday, you pull me into the Jeep, and we head northeast down back roads, find Cottonwood Flat and Little Rough Creek. We wind through red clay canyons caught in clear March light, the air tinged with old music. Settling into the day, I inhale fields fresh with winter rye, just ripened to the shade of sex. We drive every road, and you, the newcomer to this land, take me places I've never been, though we don't even cross the county line. This morning, that same strong light slants through bedroom blinds and sprawls across our hearts. I know there's no plan for this day or next year, but I recall yesterday the way we suddenly twisted out of the canyon and up onto the flatland. You turned to me and smiled, and there before us lay a red dusted carpet of a road, unfurled all the way to forever. Thank you. So if anyone has any questions, you might need to be kind of loud. I don't know how well I can tell even who's talking behind the mask. And Darren, can we take questions from Facebook? So if you're watching live via Facebook, if you'll type the question into the comment bar, if we have time, we'll get to those also. Yes?
What was your inspiration of becoming a writer?
Okay, you're going to have to be really loud because I can't hear with that mask.
What was your inspiration for becoming a writer?
For the, what was my?
What was your inspiration for becoming a writer?
Oh, I like to read a lot, and so I won't say from the time I can remember, but especially from high school on, I've always wanted to be a writer. I read constantly when I was growing up, not poetry, because I didn't really like poetry, believe it or not, but read a lot of Nancy Drew mysteries. So I think just because I love to read, I like the idea of becoming a writer myself and being able to express some of those ideas. Thank you. Yes?
I appreciated also your inspiration for each of the poems that you read. have you ever encountered the beginning of some type of inspiration, and once you got into it, found out for some reason you couldn't do it?
Oh,
By
definitely.
that, I hope you did that. I'm talking about it hit home too much or something like that.
Okay, I'll repeat the question so that people on Facebook can hear. Russ, that is you, right, Russ? Okay, ask, have you ever had some inspiration, got started into a poem, and then found out you really just couldn't do it, either because you couldn't handle it?
Whatever.
Yeah. I have many unfinished poems, I'll put it that way. So, and many things that are scribbled that I thought were going to turn into great poems that didn't quite make it. As far as if I ever felt really inspired but couldn't go there because it was too upsetting, I do have some of those maybe. I mean, I'm dealing with some things in my, maybe in my past, I think that we all do, that I'm beginning to write about. But for the most part, just sometimes it never quite makes it to the finished stage. But yeah, that's a great question. Yes?
If you weren't a writer, what would you be, if just in general?
If I weren't a writer, I mean, going back to the time I was little, I wanted to be an actress, but I kind of sucked at that. So would be probably what I was for many years, which was a teacher. So, I mean, because I didn't think I wanted to teach, but once I got into the classroom, I actually loved it. So, teacher, actress, those are probably kind of it. Didn't have any other aspirations. I can't sing. So, these are great questions. Yes?
How has your poetry helped you understand this area in a different way? Talk about what
Okay, how has my poetry helped me understand? What was the last part of it?
liberal or this area in a different way. Now that you've been writing about it, thinking about it.
Okay, I'm still having hard, the people in this area, is that what you said? Or, we need a mic for the questions, baby.
How has your poetry, as you've been writing about liberal and this area over time, helped you understand this area in a different way?
Okay, that is a great question, and again, I'll repeat it for those watching on Facebook. How has writing poetry about liberal and this area helped me understand the area, and in a different way? I think almost every time I write a poem about anything, I come to a deeper understanding of the subject matter, which is one of the reasons I like to write. So, just for example, Some Electric Hum, I think working through what I was writing about in the poem helped me gain maybe an appreciation for the artistic side of liberal, or what it could offer in terms of inspiration. And again, the other one that I read, Wake Up Call, I can't say I really understood the terrorist, but I definitely feel like I got into their mindset a little bit. So, but again, I feel like that's true of any poem I write, and I think most people that write probably would agree that when you write about something, you actually understand it better. Yes?
When you are writing, do you prefer to write pen to paper or through the computer?
Okay, that's another good question. When I write, do I prefer to use pen and paper or type it out? If I am writing anything but poetry, I almost always start even notes and drafts on the computer. I would much rather type an essay. I don't write a lot of fiction, but anything else, I'm doing it on the computer. If I'm writing a poem, often I will take some initial notes on a legal pad, like in longhand, or sometimes on the back of an envelope, or wherever I am when I have the idea. As soon as I have enough of the idea down to get what I think is some kind of rough draft, I type it up, because it helps me shape the poem into lines and stanzas. So I start sometimes in longhand, but pretty quickly I move to typing it so that I can see how it looks on the page. And also, I'm not that organized, and I have legal pads and envelopes scattered around. I might never find the draft of the poem again if I don't get it in my computer. Yes?
How old were you when you published your first book?
When I published my first book or my first poem?
Your first book.
Okay, so this is my first book. I'm not going to tell you my age. That was a trick question. She asked how old I was when I published my first book.
You are today's years old.
Yes, that's exactly right. Actually, I was a year younger because I published it right before my birthday. So I was quite young. I think the message for that is you're not too old to work on a goal or a dream. This is a goal I've had for quite some time, and it finally happened. As far as, I have a number of poems published in literary journals. I was in college when I published the first one of those, but I was sort of a late bloomer. I went to college in my 30s. So I had my first poem published in my 30s, and that was a while back. Thank you. Audrey?
Outside of poetry, if you were to write a story, which would it be, fiction or
Fiction or nonfiction?
non-fiction?
Yeah. I have written several short stories. I don't think they're that good. So if I were going to write something other than poetry or in addition to poetry, it would probably be creative nonfiction, personal essays. I wrote a lot of newspaper columns when I worked for the newspaper. So, and it's not, I mean, I love to read fiction. I just somehow I found my niche in writing poetry. Do we have any Facebook questions?
We have a couple of them. From a Diane Shea. Do you tend to write your poems straight through, or does it take time for them to figure themselves out?
Okay, that's another great question. Sometimes I can get quite a bit of a draft out, like in one setting, but that is pretty unusual for me. And even if I get a pretty solid draft, like first draft out, I usually spend months and maybe sometimes years on a poem. I mean, like I'll write several drafts, then I'll put it aside, and then I come back to it. I'd say a typical number of drafts for a poem is 10 to 15 drafts. So, and usually that's over a period of 5 months, 6 months, 8 months, or I mean, there are some poems in the book that I started and didn't finish until like 2 or 3 years after the first draft. So I hardly ever would say that I've written a poem well, I've never written a poem where I just sit down and it came out. It doesn't work that way, or at least not for me.
We got another one from Sue Sprinkle. The life of a writer's artist is filled with rejections. How do you deal with that and keep pressing on?
Okay, so if you can write a lot, and if you're not interested in publishing it, you're never going to get rejected. So that's the good thing about that. If you want to submit and get it published, then you're going to get rejections. And I'm going to say you get rejections, not you get rejected, because they're not rejecting you as a person. They're just rejecting that particular piece of work. So I have a whole lot more rejections than I do acceptances. The way I handle that is I like to constantly have some poetry submitted to journals, because then when something gets rejected, because it's going to get rejected, I still have more out there and it's not quite so devastating. It does hurt when you get a rejection though, especially when you think this is like the world's best poem that you've ever written, and for whatever reason they don't take it, but that happens a lot. I get a lot of rejections. Maybe time for one more question if anybody's got one. Yes, Noemi?
So I know as a writer, it can be very hard to like share your poetry, especially when it's personal. So how do you get over the fear of sharing those personal experiences?
That's a great question. She said sometimes it can be hard to share your work, especially if it's really personal, and how do you get over that fear? One thing for me, like when I send my work out to journals, like they don't know me, so it's really easy to send it somewhere else. And I have a few poems that are very personal that actually I have published, but I don't necessarily read those like at a reading. It's a lot easier for me to take, like here they are in the book and you can go read them and I don't have to look at you while I read it if it's something that's really close to me. So the more you practice sharing with someone that you're comfortable with, maybe not somebody that the poem is about, but just, you know, somebody that can give you some feedback, I think the easier it gets. You feel a little bit more confident about putting yourself out there. And I think it's good also to remember the poem is not necessarily always I'm not going to say it's not true, but I mean, it may not be factual. So it helps me to remember I'm writing a poem, people are reading it. It's not necessarily all about me. Anybody else? Yes.
How long does it take you to write your novel?
Okay, so how long have I been writing poetry?
How long does it take you to
Again, I came to it actually late. I started reading poetry in college and actually started writing it at that time. I mean, I read some poetry earlier, but didn't really write any poetry in high school or anything like that. So I was in my early 30s when I started writing, and I don't know, fell in love with reading it and writing it. So I took a pretty long break after graduate school, but I've written quite a bit in the last 4 years, I would say. I think we're probably ready, unless somebody else has a burning question, and you can always email me and ask me those. Terry is going to come up and draw for 2 people that are here for books, and then I'm going to go ahead and go out there. My books will be for sale for $15. I'll take check or cash, or Terry will take check or cash. She's going to collect the money. If you brought a book with you that you already have, you can line up by me. If you're buying a book, you can line up by her. If you don't want to buy a book, but you want to stop and say hi to me, that would be great also. Like, don't feel like you have to buy a book. Although I will say, if you know somebody that likes poetry and they're not here, a signed copy of the book would make a great gift. If you have an enemy that hates poetry, think how much fun it would be to get them a signed copy.
Hey, online direction, how can they get the book?
Oh, okay. How can you get my book? If you are watching online, if you will go to my website, and basically if you just type my name into Google, you'll find my website. It's janicenortherns.com. So just type my name in. Some of the things will come up, hopefully nothing embarrassing, and my website should be one of them. I am going to go ahead and run outside, but you guys have been a great audience. Thank you so much. See, it sounds like there's hundreds of people here. That's great. And I'll see you outside. Again, feel free to stop by and say hi, even if you're not buying a book.